right, welcome everybody. I'm glad to see such incredible attendance on the very last day of Ignite. Not quite the last session of the week, but pretty close to the last session of the week. So welcome, welcome. Today, we've got proactively design and build resilient workloads on Azure. I'm 𝗦𝗲𝗀𝗶𝗫𝗀, and I'm here with Shweta Rohilla, and we're both from the customer success organization, all right? And what we do in customer success is we work with all sorts of customers all across the globe. We learn from our customers on their Azure adoptions, their challenges, what's working, what's not, where could we do better at Microsoft. We take all of those learnings and we build strategies and solutions to help drive specific initiatives. Of course, we're all here today to discuss one of the ones that is most near and dear to me, which is resiliency. So we're gonna go through resiliency. We're gonna give you kind of a whirlwind tour. We have lots of tools to share with you, lots of insights. We're gonna have a couple demos, or at least I know for sure one demo. And I've got a bunch of links and just things for you to follow up on after the call, or after the session today. All right, so our agenda is actually super simple. And it aligns very closely with our strategy. So we're gonna go through how to get started with resiliency, right? We're gonna say, well, all right, well, what if I'm not? How do I get there? And once I'm there, how do I stay there? Okay, so we're gonna take you through all three pieces of our strategy and show you some of the tools and things that we have available that you can use right now, today, to help you on this journey. Just kind of to level set the room here and some things that we've learned. First off, probably not a big surprise, but the majority of our customers are looking to do cloud-first strategies in their organization. And this is definitely the direction that we're seeing when we work across many of the customers in the CSU, right? And when we look at that, we have to say, all right, we wanna make sure that for those customers that are adopting that strategy, let's make sure that they're following a resilient, kind of posture when they do things like this. So first off, unplanned outages, those are the worst. Right, and I personally can tell you I know those are the worst because I see some of the customers on their very worst days when they have an unplanned outage. And when I mean their worst day, I mean it is generally a horrible day for them, maybe the worst day of their career, definitely one of the worst days in their organization when they have an unplanned outage. If it impacts a mission critical workload, it's just absolutely, a horrible event for them. We at Microsoft, we get right in there, we help them get back up and running. We wanna understand, we wanna learn how we can do better with that customer, and we continue to iterate on that. So we'll see unplanned outages. One thing to tell you is that we've done a deep analysis of a lot of these, right? And we look at the customer's architecture, what could have gone better, what could we learn from this? And one of the big learnings we had from this is about 74% of these outages that we saw with customers could have been prevented if they followed the guidance that's in the well-architected framework. Now, not every outage can be prevented by following that guidance, but the majority of them can. And what you wanna do, and what you wanna learn from us is you wanna figure out how can you not feel these things with your mission critical workloads when they happen, across the globe? And Shweta and I, we're gonna take you through a lot of this today to help you understand that. All right, so it does start with the shared responsibility. There is certainly things that can be done on the architecture side that could help you be more resilient, right? And that's the customer's responsibility that, or if they're working with the partner working with the customer's responsibility. And there is a lot of things that can be done to improve the resiliency of your workload and also make sure that you're testing the resiliency of your workload so you know it actually works. Okay, we in the Azure platform have built resiliency features that the customer could take, advantage of, like, zones, or, we've got backup BCDR solutions. We have a lot of things there that are available for the customer to take advantage of. And then, of course, a resilient foundation. That's on the Azure platform side, and that's on Microsoft's side of the house, where we work to make sure we are, operationalized, monitoring, making sure we have rigorous change management process to ensure that we have a highly resilient, Azure platform for you. Okay, now I'm gonna come back to the slide at the end, but I just wanted to share with you real quick that we do have a new offering available for you. And this offering is called Azure Essentials. And where we first really starting with Azure Essentials is on resiliency. Watch, it's really, kind of relevant for this talk today. So Azure Essentials is going to be a one-place shop where you can go where we pull together all the resiliency guidance for you. Okay, there's a toolkit that's available. I have a link there for you on the screen. And again, I'll bring it up at the end. And this is a way that you could get help from Microsoft. You say, hey, we would like someone to come in and take a look at our mission critical workload and let us kind of work with us to see where can we improve it, how can we remediate these items. And it is really a nice co-offering where Microsoft ourselves actually work on this in the field with our CSU, and we work with partners and customers to bring it all together. So it's got a really nice story for you to make sure that you're becoming resilient if you're not there today. Okay, so let's jump into it. So we have an initiative at Microsoft called Proactive Resiliency. And this is our Proactive Resiliency framework. And it comes down to those three things. I had them in the agenda. How do we start resilient? Because if you start resilient, that's the easiest path you can go on. But what if you're not, or you don't know if you are or aren't? We've got Get Resilient. And then Stay Resilient. We've got some tooling there as well to help you actually stay on the right path and put those guardrails in play. Okay, so on the Start Resilient side, I'm going to just quickly flash up the Cloud Adoption Framework. Okay, why is this important? Because most journeys into the cloud start with the Cloud Adoption Framework, and they start with Azure Landing Zone, right? Azure Landing Zone is that foundation that puts you on an architectural path for long-term success in Azure, all right? At Azure Landing Zone, we see, like a couple thousand deployments every quarter of Azure Landing Zone. It's widely adopted. And it puts all the best practices in place for you on day one. You literally start resilient with Azure Landing Zone. For example, and this is like a recent thing that we've added, we put multi-region support in there. So if you used Azure Landing Zone, say maybe you're like 2 years back, it deployed to a single region. We actually added second region support. So now it's by default, when you deploy Azure Landing Zone, you get that second region. And if you've been using Landing Zone for a while, there is brownfield guidance there for you for how to get that second region in there. All right, we do update this quarterly, so as as all the various engineering products, update, we keep this in sync with them, so you have the latest and greatest guidance as well as implementation, accelerators for Azure Landing Zone. We also made sure everything is zonal redundant. Right? So any services that we deploy in Azure Landing, I think we deploy 13 services in the foundational pieces. We make sure that they're using zones. Okay, so you've got zones and multi-region support right out of the box, right on day one, and it helps you get resilient. Now, this is the platform landing zone that I'm showing here right now, but we also have application landing zones. So for example, think of like SAP or, AVM, Azure Virtual, or AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, for example. Like, we have landing zone accelerators there, and those also adhere to the same things where it's going to make sure that it's utilizing zones and putting you on that right path for resiliency. Just another thing just to mention is we are working pretty closely with the Azure Migrate PG on Azure Landing Zone, and we're looking to actually have them adopt Landing Zone in that tooling itself. So that's something that's on our roadmap that's coming up. All right. Now, before I talk about the next piece, I just wanted to quickly flash up again the well-architected framework. So the well-architected framework has 5 pillars. Of course, what we're really talking about today is the pillar underneath reliability. There is absolutely a ton of guidance in there to help you understand how do you configure those workloads that you're going to be running in Azure, what are some of the approaches you can take, what are the principles that you can follow, what are some best practices that have worked. We have tons of content and information there as well. And I want to make sure that all of you have taken, take some time to go into the well-architected framework. There is, just like I said, a wealth of information there, and we are trying to codify these best practices wherever we can. So when we talk about starting resilient, besides Azure Landing Zone, which absolutely gets you to start resilient, along with those accelerators, we have something called Azure Verified Modules. So say you've got to construct your workload and you want to know, like, what are all the pieces that are going to need to, I'm going to need to use to make up my workload. And you want to do this with infrastructure as code, which is very common, right? We see a lot of customers really embracing and adopting infrastructure as code. We have built a library of modules called Azure Verified Modules. And each of these modules is like a composable building block that basically encapsulates the resources for a scenario or thing that you want to do. So if you want to deploy a virtual machine, we wrap in that module all the various pieces that you need to have a successful virtual machine deployment. And in there, we made sure we have the WAF defaults for reliability and security. So we're following that, like I had on that previous slide, we're following the well-architected framework and making sure that we've put all the defaults in there. This way, when you deploy a module, instead of you having to write the module yourself and remember to do all of these things, all this work has been done for you, and we update it. So we keep this updated, and we make it available in the Bicep registry and the Terraform registry for you, okay? And the link for it right there is up on the screen, and I'll have this at the end of the deck for you as well, so you can see it. So I wanted to share with you some of the work that we do with this. Like it's not just a collection of quick start templates or something like that that you may have seen in the past. These are durable modules that we maintain, update, and verify with engineering. Now, how do we know? Just to give you a sense of what we do here. This is right from the Reliability Hub on our product ops for virtual machine. And one of the recommendations they would say is, availability zone support, okay? So that's the recommendation. What we've done is we made sure we have something called the Azure Proactive Resiliency Library. We have the same recommendation in that, and Shweta is going to demo this for you in just a few minutes. But I want to show you that this recommendation is both in the Reliability Hub and in the Azure Proactive Resiliency Library. What we've done with that recommendation, which you can see is high, it's a high impact recommendation, is we made sure in the Bicep module for AVM that we have a required field for that, and that you have to make a choice. You can't just forget, right, or just let the default happen for how you would configure availability zones. You would actually have to, when you actually set it up in your pipeline, in the parameters, you would actually have to put a 0 in there to say, I'm just not going to use zones, and I'm just going to roll the dice with that VM, right? And we'll see what happens. But in this one here, you actually can pick which zones, you could see where you could actually say, hey, I'm going to put it number 1, and then the next one I'll do number 2 and number 3, and then we'll maybe put a load balancer or something like that in front of it. So we've made that. In all modules, we've done this work for you, so you can't forget about zones. Now, here's another example. Here's a security example, right? And this is the Linux one, right? Linux virtual machine, and I think it's, disk encryption. Okay, so Microsoft Defender for Cloud recommends this, all right? Azure Verified Modules. We make sure, again, it's required, and we're defaulting to yes, to true. You can't forget to turn on disk encryption anymore if you're just using the Azure Verified Modules in your infrastructure as code. As your developers take and work with these modules, it'll just happen. And they won't have to think about it, and I think you'll be in a better place. Now, we have to make sure that we're enforcing this in the pipeline. So we have, here's an example here of our Azure Verified Module pipeline. And you can see I've got a bunch of, there's a check there for PS rules. This is the Bicep example. And in Bicep, we use PS rules. Okay, so what does this look like? So here's one where we do basically a pre-flight check is what we call it. This is before it's deployed. We check the code to make sure the code itself is still adhering to the well-architected framework, into the defaults, and what we've already kind of put into the built into the modules. So you can see here, there's a bunch of rules that have passed, but the one we're picking on right now is public IP, and again, availability zones. And we want to make sure that you're using the right SKU, right? You got to be using a standard SKU, right? If you're using the basic SKU, you can't use zones. So you got to be using the right SKU. We check for that. You can see here in PS rule, just so you know, that we've codified 211 of these under security, and I believe it's 88 of these we've done so far in reliability, and we work on this every month in our sprints to add more and more rules. We do this for both Terraform and we do this for Bicep. In Terraform, we use tflint, all right? And then in Bicep, of course, we use PS rules to make sure we codify this. So at the end, when you look at the unit test, right, you can see that, like in the example here, I believe I've got, I think it's a VM making sure it's using zones. Remember that example I showed in the beginning, whether or not you've configured zones or not? If you even go and try to change the default, say you said, all right, I don't want this to be a required field, so we can skip over this, in our pipelines, and you go to run that, that would fail that test. Of course, in this sample here I'm showing you, it passes the test because we haven't changed the default. It's required that you configure zones. But this should help you to enforce this, so it's even hard to get around someone that may go in and just change the code there, and it'll still fail the test, and then something should kind of trigger, like, oh, wait, why did we do that? Oh, geez, look, we're not going to be highly available. So the two things to walk away from here on the Start Resilient: Azure Landing Zone accelerators, and using verified modules. All right. But now we're going to kind of switch it over to Get Resilient, and I'm going to turn it over to Shweta, and she's going to show you what that looks like.
Thanks, Rob. Hey, everyone. I'm Shweta Rohilla. I am Principal Technical Program Manager, lead Azure Resiliency and Observability with our worldwide customer success team, and I've been building some solutions with our talented team that I'll touch upon today, some of them, with hyper focus on Get Resilient aspect of it. And we all agree, I think, as we increasingly rely on cloud-based solutions, ensuring the resiliency is crucial to business continuity. And journey to resiliency starts with a strong foundation, and like Rob covered, how ALZ and AVM help you do that. But what if you didn't start with ALZ or AVM, right? And you already have an application running on Azure. Or maybe you did start with ALZ or AVM, but that was a year ago. And let's face it, cloud is ever evolving. New features comes up every day, new enhancements comes up every day. We learn from our recent challenges as well, right? So how do you assess, like, what is deployed right now is using the best practices, right? And if you decide, like, I'm going to compare, I'm going to run these, run the latest available features with what's deployed, you put together a team together, you start running the assessment, and it's going to be time consuming because there's going to be a lot of SMEs required, right? And we all agree, like, resilience is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing journey. You have to do it periodically. Imagine having something with a curated list of recommendations with some automation built on top of it that collects data from your deployed application, compares it against the best practices, analyzes the results, and automate the reporting. And that's what one of the solutions we have built. It's called April. It's Azure Proactive Resiliency Library. And having something with the curated list, it's help you with the operational excellence as well, right? So overall, April, it has curated list of recommendation by resources, and that recommendation can be customized by workload, by SAP, AVM, AVD, et cetera. And as you identify these potential issues that can cause disruption, and then you take action on fixing it, you're helping with improving your uptime and reliability. And let's take a moment to let that sink in, right? Suppose you have identified VM that's not zonal resilient. That means any of the zonal outage, there's going to be an outage, right? And you decide to take a step to put across zonal. There's going to be some downtime to make it zonal resilient, right? But then you are going to change your VM SKUs at a non-critical business hours, and the duration of the outage is known to you, versus if the outage happens, it's probably going to happen at a business critical time, unknown duration, you don't know your recovery time, you don't know how much data you're going to lose, right? It's a nightmare for CTO, CEO, or if you're a chief architect, right? So compare it against that, right? You manage and control when you fix the problem and take actions versus something that's unexpected and going to be a nightmare or the worst day of your life. And yeah, another good advantage of April is it aligns with well-architected framework, so you're ensuring that you're adhering to the industry standard. And because it has tools available, it minimizes the operational overhead. You don't have to run all these checks. Like right now, we have 500 plus recommendation across 79 services and growing every day. Our team is actively working on this. Every month, there's new enhancements that are coming, right? So imagine doing that manually. It's going to be time consuming, again, error prone, and because we have automation built on top of it and made it available to you, you are minimizing operation overhead significantly and saving so much of time, right? With that, what I'm going to do quickly, I will show you a little bit of a show and tell, very high level. We don't have a lot of time to go into depth of every demo. I'll show you the library and just to give you that feeling of how easy it is to run and leverage this library, right? So this is the site of Azure Proactive Resiliency Library, and the easy access to this is aka.ms/aprl, and we have guidance on the side. You can see at Azure resource level, there's different categories. For example, compute. You go to the virtual machines, and here are all the recommendations that have resiliency category if they belong to high availability, disaster recovery, scalability, et cetera. And there's impact assigned to it. So you can prioritize, if you come up with these are the remediation you need to take, you can prioritize. You can prioritize first what are the high impact one versus medium impact one, right? And you go to any of these recommendations, it takes you to more details about what this recommendation is about, description, a link to how to fix this. For example, here, deploy VM across availability zone, and there's a learn more link here that can help you learn more about it and how to implement this recommendation. And then at the bottom, there's ARG query, which if you copy and paste in your Azure Resource Explorer, you will see, for example, I've done it already. You will see all the VMs that this recommendation applies to, right? But then we have this ARG query where possible. We don't have it for all the recommendation, but even for the ones that's available, it's going to be time consuming, right? So we have built another section called tools here, which has different automation scripts. One is collector script, first one, right? It takes all the recommendation from April, takes the automation ARG queries, run it against the workload that you passed. It can be one subscription, multiple subscription, or resource groups, right? It can be run at different scopes. It also collects the data from recent outages, advisor recommendation, your recent support requests, service retirements, any of the service health alerts, and then puts it in a JSON file. Analyzer script on top of it takes a JSON file that all the data that's collected from collector script, analyzes it, and puts the result in an action file that's easier for you to read, put in different sections, different tabs. You can correlate, these are the recent outages I have had. These are the impacted resources, and then summary towards the end, right? I'll show you the Excel in a bit. And the report script takes that Excel sheet and then produces a PowerPoint presentation and Word doc based on the data in the Excel sheet. That's more like your executive summary. And let's jump into how easy it is to run this collector script. So it can be run on Cloud Shell or local machine. I usually run it on my local machine. There are some prerequisites listed very well on this site that you start with the PowerShell, you install some modules, and then you set some execution policy. You do that because the import Excel module is not digitally signed. And then you download the script, which I have already here. I'll just show you. I ran it this morning. I downloaded all the scripts here. And then if I run, and for the first script to run, I can pass it, what is the tenant ID I want the script to read the data from? And then what are the subscription IDs or resource groups? Right? And I can have different ways, like different customers are using different ways to deploy the workload. I might be that, 2 of the subscription, and in third subscription, one of the resource group has that workload. So you can pass that. It's very flexible the way you define the workload. And I like to do it in a config file, and you can pass this as a command line parameter as well. But in a config file, that's how you do it. Tenant ID, subscription ID 1, but in subscription 5, you're passing one of the resource group, right? And you run it. I ran it this morning. You just pass it. It took me just 2 minutes to run it, 2 minutes, I think 17 seconds or so, to run about 200 checks. And then it gave me a JSON file. And after that, I just run my script number 2 and pass that JSON file to it, right? And in the end, it's going to take, I think, less than a minute. It gives me an Excel file like this with different tabs. It gives me the result, what are the recommendations, and if these recommendations are implemented or not. In the first tab, you'll see even though the recommendations are implemented, it'll show, yes, they are implemented. So you're seeing everything, like what are the best practices you're already following, what are the best practices you're not following already. And the source of the recommendation source, it can be April or advisor. And then in the next tab, quickly, it shows us what are the recommendations that are not being followed, and what is the source of that. And sometimes, it's not that all the checks have been part of. The April query, sometimes you have to take the action and do it manually. So we have different categories, right? Query under development validation is not available, so please check it manually. Or recommendation cannot be validated with ARG because there is not a field that's available you can put an ARG on top of. So you have to check it manually as well. Or sometimes you are using a resource type for which we don't have recommendation available in advisor or APRL. So you'd go and check it manually as well. So it lists you all that, like what are the checks already done and what are the things you need to do manually. And then it gives you some nice summary in the tabs. After that, what are the retirements that are coming, support tickets you have recently raised where you need help, so you can correlate the two. And the pivot table, like how many recommendations you have by resource types, how many of them are high, medium, and low, et cetera. And then quickly, when you run the third script, it's super easy as well. You'll type something like, your third script, I'm going to pass the customer name, Contoso in this case, what is my workload name, maybe it's an e-commerce website, and the Excel file that just my script number 2 generated. And I hit enter, and in few minutes again, it's going to give me the Word doc with the summary, again, with nice visualization, and it will have sections still that you need to go and validate, and it will tell you that. For example, here in the PowerPoint, it has nice visualizations on what are the recommendations by resiliency category, scalability, disaster recovery, or high, medium, and low. And then it also has sections on, hey, this was not checked automatically, but it's critical that you check the resiliency of your express route, et cetera. Is it multi-site resilient? And what is the status of your SOS health alerts? So go and do, an action is required, as it says on the top, that go update the slide manually. And that's perfect for your executive summary, right? So that's high level. APRL, I couldn't go in deep because we don't have a ton of time today. But yeah, please embrace April. You're taking the proactive steps towards ensuring the success and reliability of your Azure application. Please embrace April. With that, I'm going to move to quickly another solution areas. And it's more of an unsung heroes of resiliency, monitoring and alerting. And I think it gives you, we all agree that, detecting early signs of any degradation or warning system is crucial, and that's how you stay ahead of potential issues. You can't fix anything if you can't see or if you don't know what the issues are, potential issues are, right? And it helps you do certain things, lots of things, right? Early detection of issue. And if you detect it and take action, it reduces the downtime. And it optimizes with the resource utilization as well. Like if you sometimes don't know, VM need to be scaled up. and it helps you stay in compliance with security or any threat detection as well. And then monitoring and alerting, it helps you understand the historical pattern. So when you're doing your capacity planning, it helps you in that direction as well. And it's an indispensable tool, right? Alerting is indispensable for ensuring reliability and performance. But there are challenges, like there are so many resource types. How would you know what are the metrics? There are so many logs, so many tables, what metric to use, what threshold to use, and then for how to scale it for the whole workload. We're using so many resource types, right? That's why we built 𝗦𝗲𝗀, Azure Monitoring Baseline Alerts Library, which right now has 500 plus alert definition across 67 services and growing every day, like April. We are still continuously making enhancements. It's a treasure trove of expert-approved alert configuration. And good thing is it has script for ARM and bicep that you can integrate into your however you want to. Like, if you're using infrastructure as code, you can do it. Or under every alert, there's a deploy to Azure button. You can just go and click it. And it's available, like April, guidance is available by resource type and workload both. It's already being used by a few customers. We are seeing about 6,000 plus unique visitors. We're seeing that from last 45 days and over 1,000 deployments just in last 45 days as well. And then when we were building 𝗦𝗲𝗀, we kept few objectives in mind, right? We see usually what takes time for customers to adopt a solution is there's some friction. There is some onboarding time. So it's easy for you to adopt, like though you're an expert or you're just starting on your cloud, because we have these automation scripts and just button like deploy to Azure, that there's minimum friction. And that means faster time to value, right? And it addresses diverse needs as well. Like, you can use by workload, you can use by resource type, and there's going to be different categories as well. Like, is it critical or is more like good to have alerts as well? So such enhancements are coming. But those are the objectives we kept in mind as we build 𝗦𝗲𝗀. With that, I just want to give you a sneak peek of what's going to come soon in 𝗦𝗲𝗀. It's not there available yet on the site, but we are working on a gap analysis workbook that read the alerts that are already deployed in your subscription and then what is recommended on 𝗦𝗲𝗀 website and shows you the result, what resource had the biggest gap and what resource have good coverage from alert point of view, right? So you can take actions and it will help you prioritize as well. Like you see maybe a VM is being used in more critical application. You want to prioritize implementing alerts for VM, right? Here's another preview of how the insight probably will look like. In this case, public IP address. It shows how many of the public IP addresses have good coverage of alerts and how many are missing the critical alerts. So that's what's coming. It's a very powerful tool. 𝗦𝗲𝗀 is very powerful, and it empowers you to make data-driven decisions, right? Improve resiliency on cloud infrastructure. Please embrace 𝗦𝗲𝗀 and take your monitoring to the next level. With that, I'm going to hand it over back to Rob to cover stay resilient aspect of it.
All right. Hey, thank you. All right. Thank you. So far, we've seen how to start resilient, and we've seen some of the tools that we have available for getting resilient, right? And a couple things just to mention on the Get Resilient side. So you saw the APRL, so the Proactive Resiliency Library. It's important, two things important to call out that when we work on the recommendations for each of the services, we sit down and review them with the engineering service leaders to make sure that we are aligned with engineering direction and we're making the right recommendations. So that's the first thing I wanted to call out. Second thing is it's a small note. You'll see it here underneath Get Resilient under Proactive Resiliency Library on this slide is advisor recommendations. So you saw tons of Azure Resource Graph queries, right? And you saw we have amazing automation to help you kind of produce analysis reports. But really our ultimate strategy and home for that is to make those available directly out of Advisor. And so to onboard those queries and those recommendations to Advisor so that you can actually go right through the Azure portal and look at the recommendations. So that's our ultimate strategy for this. But until we get there, we have this available for you today. And it is something that we use in all of our engagements in the field. I know that we've also trained partners on how to utilize this as well through Azure Essentials. And of course, it's available for any customer that just wants to go and self-service and grab it and work with it today. Also, on the Azure Monitor baseline alerting, very similar. Again, we want to make sure that it's just not, hey, this is what we think the threshold should be, and these are the things you should be monitoring at a baseline, at a bare minimum. This is what you should be doing. But we want to make sure that it's, again, aligned with engineering. So, reviewed with engineering to ensure that we're providing you what is in not only your best interest, but aligned to their strategy as well. So we do that for actually all of our tools, including Landing Zone accelerators, and AVM. It's a common theme that we do in any of the solutions that we build out of our customer success organization and work with all of our customers on. All right. So I know this is a lot, but there's but wait, there's more, right? There's actual stay resilient. Like, okay, you have done an incredible job starting resilient, right? You have gotten to some, you've used the tooling, figured out what you needed to address, you followed the guidance in each one of those recommendations, and you implemented those recommendations. Fantastic. But you want to stay there, right? You don't want to drift out of resiliency, especially in some of your mission critical workloads and things like that. So what we've done in engineering is we've created what we call the Azure Zone Resilience policies. And I believe the first wave, I want to say, came out last February. And it was, I don't know, maybe it was like 12, 13 services. And we're up to 34 services now. And what this is it's a policy initiative, so you don't have to go and, it's bundled in a policy initiative. And you could basically use that policy initiative to, first, of course, you could put it in audit mode, right? And that will just at least give you kind of an idea of where you currently stand today. But preferably, you would want to put it in deny mode, where you deny folks from deploying services that aren't configured to be zonal redundant. All right, and so I know the text is really small on the screen there, but you could see, at least a list of the Azure services, and you get the full, complete list on the link I have in a slide coming up in a few slides from now. All right, good news with this is, back to start resilient in Azure Landing Zone, we do deploy this policy by default, by the way, just so you know. So if you don't know anything about this, never heard of this before, but you've used Landing Zone or you stayed up to date with Landing Zone, you already have this. And the Landing Zone accelerators, they also make sure that this policy is there as well. So any of the Azure Landing Zone accelerators that are in the Architecture Center on the Landing Zone, there's a Landing Zone blade for that. You will also find that we put these there as well. So we're trying to get the word out. It's a great way to make sure you're not drifting off of resiliency. So this is something, if you learned anything from our talk today, this is a good one for you, hopefully, just to go and apply at your management group level. You can at least start with audit mode and see how that shakes out in your environment, and then maybe graduate it to deny mode once you feel comfortable with it. So that's a great way to get started. So there is like I said, there's a lot here to go through, and I know we just probably dropped 5 tools on you today, but there is some links here and some self-paced learning for you, because we've done a lot here to help you skill up, be aware of what we have and places to learn more. So please take a look here at the reliability and resiliency documentation that we have, tooling that we have, the frameworks that are out there today, and there's some really good stuff on Learn that for kind of skilling up videos and so on. All right, now I want to leave you, but before I do, with essentials again. I realize it's a lot. Like I said, there was a ton of tools there, and I just flashed a lot of links and things like that for learning. But if you would like help from Microsoft or have help from a partner, we have an Azure Essentials offering that's available for you. This is free offering, by the way. So you could actually go to Azure Essentials. You could take a look at the toolkit, the resource kit that we have available for you, and this will help you to basically understand where you are with resiliency today. By the way, the things that we shared with you today are the things that we do in these engagements, right? So there's no like secret Microsoft sauce here, right? Anything that we do, we make publicly available for all of you that you can utilize in your own environments. But if you want help, you want a skilled expert, someone that's done this before, knows how to have those executive conversations, right? To kind of convince people to do the right things with resiliency, you have this Azure Essentials program where we started with resiliency, and we do plan, by the way, for Azure Essentials not only to cover resiliency, but of course we're going to cover security and optimization as well, performance, really the things that you think about in the well-architected framework we really want to bundle into Azure Essentials. And we of course also will have things like Azure Landing Zone accelerators, verified modules, things like that as well. All right. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, and Shweta's still here with us as well. So with that said, for anybody who has any questions, you want to learn more, Shweta and I are going to hang out and be available for you. I want to thank you all, of course, for attending today. And I think there's still one more breakout session left, so enjoy your final moments of Ignite. Thank you.